In today's episode, we're going over 3 ways for physical therapists to increase their income without sacrificing their sanity in the process. Let's get going. So, I think this Twitter post from Danny Matta kind of sums up the problem in a nutshell here. I'm just going to read it to you. And I actually fact checked this. This is actually true. And this data is from a couple of years ago. And I tell you what, things have not gotten better since then. The average physical therapist student debt is $142,489. The large majority of that debt is coming from grad school. Okay. So some of these folks are having undergrad debt and a little additional debt. But generally speaking, the large majority is coming from PT school and then a little bit from other sources. Excuse me. The average salary for physical therapists is $91,000. Doesn't sound terrible, but that's the average. That's not a new grad, right? That's not someone who's coming out of school. Okay. So the lower end is probably closer to 70, 75. I started a while ago, right? Maybe a decade ago, but I started at 60,000 at the time. Folks are actually starting a little bit lower. And if you're an outpatient orthopedics, it's going to be lower probably than in a hospital setting, a SNF setting, right? Or if you're doing some sort of home health. The average software engineer student debt is $36,000, right? Generally speaking, they have a lot less time in school. As a physical therapist, you got 7 years and a doctorate. A lot of these folks are doing 4 and coming out with a lot less debt. Their average salary is $121,309. And lastly, this is what Danny said. You got to really want to be a physical therapist for many reasons besides money. Okay. And I wholeheartedly agree. Okay. But I think the other problem is that, so you go into PT because you want to help people. And obviously that's important. And I'm sure that most folks do that. And that's great. However, life is expensive, right? You have bills to pay when you come out of school. Maybe you buy a house, you have some kids, right? And the PT salary just doesn't cut it, especially if you have to pay for all of that student loan debt. So what ends up happening is that students will graduate, they live with their parents, they can't buy a house, or they end up trying to, and now they're scrambling to make additional income, right? So it really depends on your situation. If you graduate with a lot of debt or not, sometimes you got to earn some extra dough. The other piece is that, like I said, you didn't go to PT school in order to be rich. But the other part is that I think that we're very powerful as a profession. If you think about the costs worldwide for something as simple as low back pain, it's astronomical. We're actually a very reasonable way for folks to get out of pain. We're a pretty easy solution. We're not really paid for that problem. Okay. So I think that we should show our value and our worth, and we probably should be getting paid more than what we currently are being paid. Okay. That's my thought. So when I was coming up with a solution to this problem, and the reason why I did this question today is because I actually had a lot of folks that responded to one of my Twitter posts and then Instagram posts about making more money. It was a question that I received pretty often, right? But it just gained a ton of traction. So I wanted to go a little bit more in depth today. So when I was trying to come up with a solution, I was giving you ideas that I had used myself that worked well. I wanted to make these solutions relatively easy, right? Because you can probably start a business just like I did, a fitness pain free, gain some sort of social media following, some sort of email newsletter, right? Spend years growing an audience and then making a course and then selling it. And is that a good way to make some income? Definitely. It's what I do currently. It is not easy in any way. Okay. So I wanted these solutions to be pretty easy for you. Okay. The second piece is I wanted to try to find ways of earning additional income that currently pays you more than you get paid as a physical therapist, right? Because if you take extra side work and you're getting paid, let's say less or the same, why don't you just work more as a physical therapist and take us home on some additional hours, right? Because that's also a pretty easy solution. I want to make sure that we're figuring out some ways to make extra income that pay you more than you get paid currently per hour. And the last piece is, how do we do this without sacrificing our sanity, right? And we'll dive into a little bit more about what I'm talking about in a minute. But I mean, we could easily go and do something very different than our career and make more money, but that's not why we got into physical therapy, right? We want to actually do something that's relevant to what we enjoy doing, what we spent 7 years and $150,000 getting, right? So here's a post I made. Received a lot of questions about it, a lot of interest, right? I think I had a ton of comments. People saying that they use some of these strategies, liking it, wanting some more information. So I wanted to go a little bit deeper. So the post I made was 3 ways to make more money as a physical therapist. And the 3 solutions I offered, and I've done all of these myself, and I actually have moved away from some of these over the course of time, but they were excellent early on in my career and a great way to drive some extra revenue. So, number 1, write training programs for patients after discharge. So basically, when your patient is finished up with physical therapy, you develop some trust with them. They want some more training. What do? Continue writing training programs for them, right? Number 2, consider personal training for patients post-discharge and charge your worth. Okay. So basically, when you finish up with physical therapy and people still want to work with you, but they don't hurt anymore, you can still help them. Okay. Third, consider cash-based physical therapy for patients once insurance runs out. Okay. This is another strategy that I've used, and I'm currently 100% cash pay, right? We're out of network providers, so people still can get reimbursed, although it's a little bit more challenging and we don't handle the insurance. But these are all great options. Let's dive into this a little bit more. So when I was coming up with these solutions, I really wanted to take into account easy solutions, making money above what you currently make, and lastly, not sacrificing your sanity. So when I say easy, we really want a natural extension to your current job. If you start a business and you're trying to make money, you need 2 different things, right? So you need leads, right? Or customers, right? So basically you need someone that you're going to solve their problem, give them some sort of product, service, whatever it is, so you can get money in return. Okay. Now you have to gain customers, right? Gain leads somehow. And usually there's some sort of marketing campaign, right? It's not easy to get these folks. However, if your customers are already the people that you're dealing with on a regular basis, you are actually warming them up for these sales later. So if you have a patient that comes in and they have some sort of complicated pain problem and you help solve that for them, they already trust you. They know that you're a valuable person. Naturally, they're going to want to continue working with you. Okay. So it's a very easy transition to make money after the fact. Okay. You don't have to warm up people that are just like cold from the streets and try to sell them on whatever product you're selling. You've already established trust with these folks. Right. Next piece is I want you to think about how much money do you currently make per hour? And I just did some math here and I'm not taking into account, let's say, benefits, right? So 401k, if this company is you're working for is matching things for you, not taking into account health benefits, that type of thing. But essentially, let's say you're a new grad, outpatient orthopedics, you're making $75,000 a year. If you break that down to, let's say you work 45 hours per week. So essentially it's 40 hours per week worth of patient care, 5 hours worth of notes, communications, emails, whatever that is, meetings. And let's say you work 49 weeks per year. You have 3 weeks of sick time and vacation, right? Relatively reasonable. It might be up or down depending on your job. That equates to about $34 per hour. So every hour that you're seeing patients and treating, right, you get paid around 34 bucks. Okay. So basically, what can we do that makes us more money than that? Because otherwise, you just work more hours. And that might be a good thing to do. Maybe pick up some part-time hours somewhere else, right? And that may pay you a bit better. Another way to do it. And the last one, we don't want to sacrifice our sanity. Okay. And I hear this a lot, and it's something I definitely considered when I graduated 10 years ago. Essentially, if you sell your soul and you work in a skilled nursing facility, and nothing wrong with SNFs, it's not a bad place to work if you want to work in a SNF, right? But essentially, you went to PT school because you want to do something specific. So if you go to 7 years worth of schooling, right, and $150,000 loans, and just come out doing something you don't want to do, why the hell did you do physical therapy in the first place? Okay. That's my thought, at least. I imagine if this is just temporary, you want to pay off your loans, whatever it is, I'm fine with that. But just keep in mind, at least for me, hey, if there's a way that I can actually continue doing what I like to do and get paid the same or more, why wouldn't I? Right. So we don't want to sacrifice our sanity. We don't want to have to move to Alaska just so we can get paid a little bit higher. Let's figure out how we can continue working in the population that we like or the setting that we like. Let's say that's outpatient orthopedics, right? And get paid the same or more. That would be great. So the first solution, this is something I did a lot of, and over the course of the past couple years, I've actually really tried to decrease this just because I have too much stuff going on from seeing patients, but also from my online business and all the social media stuff I do. It's a lot, right? But one really great way to get some additional income as a physical therapist is to write training or fitness programs for patients after discharge, right? So let's say that you're working with a patient and they're doing really, really well. Their pain's going down. They're getting back to all of their fitness activities, right? And after they finish up, they still want to work with you. Okay. And you might want to plant this seed in their mind. Oftentimes, I ask a lot of questions when I first see a patient, right? So the initial evaluation, what are your goals? What are you thinking long term, right? Okay, we can help you get out of pain. We can also transition you and we can write training programs afterwards, right? So that's already in their mind and they're thinking about it. You establish a lot of trust. You show that you're a valuable physical therapist, a good physical therapist, because they get out of pain, they're back to squatting, deadlifting, whatever it is. So the next natural step at the conclusion is like, hey, can I still work with you in some capacity? Yes, you certainly can. I can write a training program or fitness program. Maybe we meet once a month for about 30 minutes and you just kind of chat about how things have been going, right? And then I write a training program for you and I charge you for it, right? Certainly reasonable. It's something I did for many, many years. And it's a great way to get some extra income. And here's the thing. So generally speaking, as physical therapists, I think most folks do this when they first start off. They lowball themselves, right? They don't charge their worth. They're like, just $20. I'll write training program for you. That's a total mistake. You're making $34 per hour. If you're charging less than $34 an hour, you're doing a total disservice to yourself. Please don't do that, right? The other piece is that folks are charging somewhere between $150 to $250 per month for fitness training, right? I've seen folks charge as high as $500 per month for fitness training, okay? And oftentimes it's not just fitness, maybe it's nutrition, right? You're meeting up with people once a week. Maybe there's, video feedback from some of their lifts. Maybe you're tech support support from text or email, right? So there's a variety of ways to do this, but please charge your worth. Okay. I think it's very, very reasonable to charge somewhere between $150 to $250 per month for these folks and to do some sort of Zoom call, then have some sort of support on a weekly basis in the form of text or emails. Ultimately, you're making a whole lot more per hour than you would be as a physical therapist. I can very easily see when folks start to build a business around training in an online way, which I have a lot of friends that do this, they stop doing their day job, right? So you see the power of this one. Next, this episode is sponsored by me, by Fitness Pain Free. I just want to tell you about the Fitness Pain Free Mini Course. So if you like what you're learning about from me currently, okay, the next natural step is to sign up for this mini course. I am going to leave a link in the show notes. I'm sorry if you're watching this live, but if you're seeing this a bit later, the link will be there. Definitely check it out. In this mini course, we go over how traditional schooling has failed us, right? I'm a physical therapist. I'm assuming you're either a personal trainer or a physical therapist. And we learn a lot of good stuff in school, but it doesn't always prepare you to be really good working with folks in the strength and fitness world. Okay. So this course is going to prepare you to learn how to do that. Next thing we go over is 7 reasons why people get hurt in the gym. If we don't know why people are getting hurt, we're not going to do a great job of getting them out of pain and keeping them that way for the long haul. Next, we go over 4 simple steps to getting your clients out of pain, right? Next is how to build a career of your dreams and earn the respect of your community. Because in reality, we want to be really good coaches and clinicians, but the reason why we want to be good coaches and clinicians is so people value us, right? So people see us as really, really good at our craft. That's why we do it. And lastly, I'm going to go over the Fitness Pain-Free certification, right? So check out the link in the show notes and you'll get this free mini course. Sign up for it, 100% free. And next, I just want to let you know about a certification I offer. It's called the Fitness Pain-Free certification. It truly is a certification I wish I had when I graduated physical therapy school. Didn't realize that there'd be a lot of holes in my knowledge. And I went out and learned how to be really, really good working in the strength and fitness world. I've been doing this for about 20 years. I'm just going to share all my secrets. The certification is open 4 times per year. The next cohort is going to be opening in the beginning of January of 2023. We go over a lot of cool stuff. Let me just read through this really quick. It'll help you learn how to gain complete confidence working with injuries in the strength and fitness realm. Okay, so if you work with a lot of Olympic lifters, power lifters, people like to run, just enjoy fitness and weightlifting on a regular basis, the certification is for you. Learn optimal exercise technique for both health and performance from myself and some of the best coaches in the world. Guys like Dave Durante, Mike Service, very, very high-level coaches. Master programming for rehabilitation and injury prevention. One of the biggest holes in knowledge for physical therapists that are graduating is writing a rehab program Folks have a hard time with writing strength conditioning programs. I'm going to help show you how to do that. Have fun taking the course because you're learning about a subject that you love, earning 31.5 CEUs for physical therapists, physical therapist assistants. If you have a CSCS, get some CEUs for that as well. Gain a university education and working with injuries in the weight room. Truly believe this. I poured my heart and soul into this. You're going to learn a ton. And lastly, I'll teach how to fill your day with the patients you love working with. Because at the end of the day, you might be a phenomenal physical therapist, right? But if you're not working with the folks that you like to work with, you're still not happy. All right. So I'll teach you how to actually get these folks through the door so you can just enjoy your life just like I do. All right. So again, I'll leave the link in the show notes. Sign up for the fitness pain-free mini course. You'll automatically be enrolled into the wait list. And in the wait list, you will be able to save $300 on the course when it is open for enrollment in January and you get early access. All right. So link in the show notes. Check it out. On to the rest of the show. So what is the solution to this problem? Number 2, we want to consider personal training after patient discharge and to charge your worth. Okay. So this is very similar to the solution number 1. Essentially, you can write a training program for someone, or you can just do personal training with them. Now, your ability to do this in the facility that you're at may be up in the air. So maybe your facility allows you to do some personal training on the spot. Okay. That will be wonderful. The tricky part with that is you're going to have to start working with folks on the weekends or in the mornings or the evenings, right? The other thing you could try to do is jam more of your patients into one day. So maybe you only work 4 days per week, 10-hour shifts. And then 1 day a week, you go to, let's say, an Equinox and you train some of your patients there, right? Just to give you an idea of how valuable this is. Let's say you work at a swanky fitness club like Equinox. The personal trainers there are generally charging somewhere between 110 to 160 bucks an hour. I'm in the Boston area, so it's definitely on the higher end, right? And as a personal trainer, you can expect maybe around 50% commission for every person that you're working with. So at the end of the day, you're now making somewhere between $55 and $80 per hour, right? And if we do the math, that's 1.5 to 3 times the amount that you currently make per hour as a physical therapist, right? So again, being a personal trainer can be a pretty high paying job if you do it well. What's nice about being a physical therapist is you're naturally creating ideal clients just by treating them for their injuries, right? So again, another easy natural extension to make a bit more cash as a PT. And lastly, you can consider doing cash-based physical therapy after insurance runs out. And with how poor insurance coverage is for folks that like to kind of push strength and fitness, and especially athletes, right? A great example is post-op ACL reconstruction. How many times you've been working with an athlete and at the 3-month mark, the insurance company is like, nah, we're not going to cover any more physical therapy. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. All the research shows you have to do physical therapy for at least 9 months to return back to sport safely, right? So it makes no sense. Insurance is a pain in the butt. So let's just get rid of that problem just by doing cash-based physical therapy. If you do a good job as a physical therapist, patients will know that. They're willing to pay you. It's not like they have to do PT 3 times a week for the next 6 months, right? Until they get that 9-month mark. Maybe you're doing once a week, every other week, whatever it is. You can come up with something that works out pretty dang well. All right. What's kind of cool is that cash-based PT, generally speaking, pays better than insurance-based, at least for the physical therapist, right? So let's say you charge somewhere between 150 and 200 bucks an hour, right? You can obviously charge less if you really need to, if you're in an area that's more low income. Although in most of the major cities that I've had the opportunity to work in, as well as my friends who work in major cities, they're charging somewhere between 150 and 250 bucks an hour. I've seen folks as high as 400 bucks an hour, right? That's not what we charge, Champion, but you certainly could push for more, right? And let's say you get paid 50% commission. That might even be better, right? I've worked out of, let's say, CrossFit gyms where they're charging a lot less. So commission was much higher for me, right? So let's be reasonable and say you collect 50% commission on each patient you do see. Let's say that ends up being around 75 to 100 bucks an hour. And all of a sudden you're making 2 to 3 times the amount per hour working cash-based, right? This is the reason, one of the major reasons why I work full-time cash-based. And currently I see somewhere between 20 and 25 patient hours per week That still allows me to make a very nice salary, and I see a lot less patients. My quality is much higher per patient. I don't feel stressed out about the way that I write rehab programs or what I tell patients to do or not to do. I'm not forced my boss to do, I don't know, 3 times a week, forced to do certain treatments that I don't believe in. There's none of that, right? It's pretty awesome. So if you have patients who want to continue with physical therapy and the insurance runs out, you can educate them about, hey, you don't have to stop. Let's do something that's cash based. Let's figure this out for you. It's a great way to get some extra income as a physical therapist. Highly, highly recommend it. Okay. So I also got some questions last week from Instagram. I want to try to go over this a little bit. The first question was from It's Jess Wayne Scott on Instagram. Apologize. I know I always butcher these. Oh, well, sorry. Her question was about strengthening exercises for sciatica. What's funny is last week, I actually just went over this, right? So sciatica, I think, is kind of a garbage pail term, right? So it's essentially, it's like I have pain originating somewhere in my glute, kind of traveling down the leg. Is this an issue in the sciatic nerve? Is it a piriformis syndrome, right? If that exists, right? Is this some sort of nerve root injury, right? Is this a radicular issue? A little bit tough to tell. So I don't love the term sciatica, right? Generally speaking, I think most folks are dealing with some sort of nervy pain down the back of one of their legs, down one of the legs, probably radicular low back pain, which I covered in depth in several podcasts. I also talked about it in last Ask Fitness Pain Free show. So I definitely recommend checking out that. But early on, you're trying to reduce symptoms. These tend to get better relatively quickly, usually by the first somewhere between 1 and 3 months. Pain has substantially gone down. When it's very painful, I'll focus on, let's say, extension-based exercises or direction of preference exercises, a la McKenzie, right? Focus on some basic motor control exercises, core strengthening. I like nerve glides. I like constant frequent motion. I like to push the movements that feel good and restrict some of the motions temporarily that don't feel good. Maybe that's flexion, right? We do a little less of that. And then as they can start tolerating strength training, we just throw as much at them as they can tolerate. And as they slowly get better, we push more and more. We try to make the strengthening exercise specific to what they want to get back to, right? And that's kind of it in a nutshell. Next question I got, and this is from Devani Panya from Instagram. The first question I got was simply a statement. It just said Trendelenburg sign, right? And well, I had to ask, like, what the heck are we talking about with Trendelenburg? Thank you for the question, by the way. And she went on to say, like, okay, what's kind of the cause? What's going on with Trendelenburg? What are you seeing, right? So first and foremost, if you don't know what a Trendelenburg sign is, imagine someone takes a step and the opposite side hip immediately drops down without control, and hip kind of pokes out to the side. So whenever they step on the affected leg, that hip will kind of sag out to the side slightly, and the contralateral hip drops very quickly without control, okay? And generally speaking, most often the cause of this is going to be some sort of major weakness within the hip, not able to control motion, so the hip immediately drops. And when you get to the end range of the hip drop, which is horizontal adduction of the ipsilateral or same side leg, you'll hit some passive restraints. The hip just kind of stops moving, okay? To be honest, when folks have hip weakness, I don't see much Trendelenburg. This is something I learned about a lot in PT school. And when I got out of PT school and started seeing patients that had true weakness of the hip abductors, right? They usually have, I call it an abduction lurch. So what they do is they lurch their trunk over top of the weak side. So every time they take a step, they'll lurch that trunk over the weak leg. And that's a more common compensation pattern that I see for folks who have a true hip weakness, okay? And you can have this weakness from, let's say, a total hip replacement and maybe a subsequent weakness of the glute medius. Sometimes you end up having associated glute medius tears. My mom actually has a full tear rupture of the glute medius tendon after a total hip replacement. She's had an abduction lurch for the past, 30 years or so, right? You can also have a glute medius tear that will lead to this as well. The last point that I want to make is that you will see folks that utilize a hip drop pattern. So let's say they're running, and every time you're on your stance leg, you will drop the opposite side hip, right? This can happen when you're doing a single-legged jump, Single-legged landing happens when folks do single-legged squats, single-legged deadlifts. You may see a big drop of the hip, or actually one of those abduction lurches where you're trying to make the work of the glute medius easier. Here's what I will say. If you have a weak hip, I don't think you're going to use that hip during high level skills. So if you're doing a single legged jump, single legged landing, and you have a really weak hip, chances are you're not going to try to utilize a hip drop strategy because the hip is simply not strong enough to control those forces. I actually think the opposite is occurring. So if you have a weak knee, right? So if your quad muscles are weak and you're jumping and landing, your body is not good at controlling the forces of knee bending or knee flexing, but your hip is super strong, you can kind of control the forces of landing eccentrically by hip dropping. Okay. So when folks see that hip drop, they automatically think, oh, hip weakness. Might not be the case, right? Maybe you're stiff at the ankle, which can lead to more hip drop. Maybe you're weak at the quad, and that's leading to some pain. Maybe you're painful at the knee, and that's driving more hip drop. It's just not always as simple as that hip is weak. That's why you're getting hip drop. I would say in the majority of athletic folks, when you see some sort of hip drop, it's not because there's weakness, right? And if you want to make sure that it's not weak, then go ahead and test it, right? Do a handheld dynamometer, test their force, see how much force they produce. And if it's pretty dang strong, they're not having a hip drop because they have weakness in the hip, okay? But that's it for today, guys. Thank you very much for the questions. If you have any additional questions, please leave them in the comments. I try to get through all of them. There's a lot of them coming in. I really appreciate it. I'm trying to get through them as much as I can. All right. Thanks, guys. And I'll see you on the next one.